Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. I am absolutely thrilled you're joining us today because we're tackling something that literally every plant lover, gardener, or farmer has to deal with at some point. I mean, we've all been there, right? You buy this gorgeous plant, you give it the absolute perfect spot in your home, you practically whisper sweet nothings to it, and despite your absolute best efforts, it just decides to give up the ghost. It's that universal gardener's guilt. But today, we're going to turn that overwhelming, super frustrating chaos of sick plants into a totally solvable puzzle. And how are we doing that? By tapping into the incredible power of conceptual models. So instead of just blindly guessing what's wrong with a drooping leaf or a weirdly spotted stem, we're going to learn how to think like true botanical detectives. Let's get into it.
It's the ultimate question, isn't it? Why do bad things happen to good plants? You water them, you make sure they get enough sunlight, and yet, out of nowhere, they just start to decline. Well, I want you to completely shift how you look at this. Try hooking into this idea. A dying plant? It's not a personal failure. Actually, treat it like a crime scene. And at this crime scene, the culprit could be absolutely anything. It might be some hidden microscopic bug, an infectious fungus, or, maybe just a recent drought that slipped under your radar. Nature is wonderfully messy, which kind of makes investigating this whole crime scene pretty complicated. Multiple different problems can actually present with the exact same symptoms. A plant suffering from root rot might look just as wilted or yellowed as a plant that's just desperately thirsty. Because of these overlapping clues, we literally can't just guess. We need a structured mindset to cut through all that noise and find the real truth.
Section 1. The Garden Crime Scene, Bringing Order to the Chaos. Section 2. The Disease Circle Model, Sorting the Suspects.
Okay, let's dive right into this. To make sense of all the crazy things that can go wrong, plant experts use a foundational conceptual model to bring immediate order to their investigations. It's a tool that helps us take this massive, intimidating list of potential suspects and neatly divide them into two distinct, manageable camps. And that brings us to our very first tool, the disease circle. The disease circle is just a brilliant conceptual model that categorizes plant stressors into two halves. On one side, we have biotic factors, so living organisms, and on the flip side, we have abiotic factors, the non-living environmental conditions. Now, it is incredibly easy to confuse the two. For instance, you might see a burnt brown edge on a leaf and immediately assume, oh no, a contagious fungal spot, when in reality it's just an abiotic nutrient burn because maybe you used a little too much fertilizer. That is exactly why the absolute golden rule of botanical diagnostics is that before we ever assume a plant disease is some contagious infection spreading through our garden, we absolutely must consult this model to categorize the potential threats.
Let's look at the breakdown here. On the biotic side, your suspects are all living culprits. We're talking fungi, bacteria, insects, viruses, and nematodes. Basically organisms that are directly attacking the plant. But over on the abiotic side, the suspects are all environmental. Think drought, accidental chemical injury, poor soil drainage, or extreme temperatures. Accidental chemical injury is actually a super classic one. Just imagine a perfectly healthy tomato plant that suddenly shrivels up just because of a slight wind drift from a lawn herbicide that was applied, like 3 yards away. I mean, it happens all the time. So the crucial takeaway here is this. Abiotic causes are incredibly common, and honestly, they're often way easier to correct. If the problem is abiotic, you can usually fix it just by tweaking your watering schedule or improving the soil. You don't need to waste your time or hard-earned money on chemical disease treatments that aren't going to work anyway. We always rule out the non-living suspects first.
Section 3. The Disease Triangle Model, the Anatomy of an Infection. So, if we've ruled out the environment and we strongly suspect a living infection, well, that's when we turn to the most crucial conceptual model in all of plant pathology. It actually teaches us a pretty comforting reality, which is that an infectious crime doesn't just happen by random chance. It requires a very specific set of circumstances. Enter the disease triangle. For a plant disease to actually develop and spread, 3 distinct elements absolutely must exist at the exact same time. First up, you need a susceptible host. This is a plant that's inherently vulnerable to the issue, maybe because it lacks genetic resistance, or, maybe it's planted completely out of its natural hardiness zone, which just inherently weakens its defenses. Second, you need the pathogen itself, the actual fungus, bacterium, or virus that's capable of causing the harm. And third, you need a favorable environment. Think high humidity, soggy soil, or the perfect temperature range that allows that pathogen to just thrive and multiply. Here's the kicker though. If even one of these 3 elements is missing, or even if it's just too weak, the disease simply cannot fully develop. The triangle completely collapses and your plant stays healthy.
Section 4. The Detective's Framework, Moving from Theory to Practice.
All right, now that we have these super powerful conceptual models under our belt, the disease circle and the disease triangle, how do we actually use them out in the real world? Well, we transition from theoretical models to a very practical, systematic investigative framework. And this is actually the exact step-by-step process used by professional horticulturists and extension agents to deduce the culprit. It's a structured, 6-step diagnostic progression designed to help you effectively eliminate variables. Step 1, identify the host plant precisely. This is huge because a lot of pathogens only attack very specific species. An oak disease really isn't going to care about your petunias, right? Step 2, describe the problem in detail. Is the leaf twisting, curling, spotting, turning yellow? Those specific visual cues matter immensely. Step 3, analyze the distribution of the damage. Is it just hitting the upper canopy, the lower leaves, or maybe the entire garden bed? Step 4, assess the timeline. Did this wilting happen overnight right after a frost, or has it been this slow, agonizing decline over several months? Step 5 is to collect your physical evidence. And finally, Step 6, review the context. Honestly, reviewing a plant's contextual and environmental history is exactly like pulling its criminal record. You're digging for past traumas, recent landscape construction, or even weird weather events from months ago that might have secretly set the stage for the current crisis.
Section 5. Gathering botanical evidence. Signs versus symptoms. As you dig into your fieldwork, particularly during Step 5 of our framework, you really have to know what you're actually looking at. Because in the plant world, evidence falls into 2 very specific categories, and mixing them up will completely derail your investigation. We have to clearly differentiate between the actual culprit left on the scene and the plant's biological reaction to being attacked. For example, if you see a caterpillar just happily munching away on a leaf, that is what we call a sign. A sign is the physical presence of the actual pest or pathogen, so the insect itself, fungal spores you can literally see with your own eyes, or bacterial ooze. On the other hand, if you notice dark spreading spots on a maple leaf, that is a symptom. A symptom is the plant's visible internal response to distress, like wilting, chlorosis, or a fungal leaf spot. The plant is reacting to an invader. Basically, finding a symptom tells you a crime occurred, but finding a sign points you directly to the suspect. You'll notice how the physical layout of the damage in your landscape practically hands you the solution. Let's talk about spatial patterns for a second. If the damage is highly uniform, say every single leaf on a plant is suddenly burned at the exact same edges, or an entire row of completely different plant species just suddenly wilts, that strongly points to an abiotic factor. The environment, like a sudden overnight freeze or an accidental chemical spray, hits everything at once without any discrimination. But if the damage is totally random, just popping up as scattered hotspots that slowly spread over time, well, that suggests a biotic, living pathogen moving naturally from host to host through your garden. And what if you see a perfectly linear line of dead plants? No way that's natural. That's almost certainly man-made. Think about a straight trench being cut for a new sprinkler system right through a really vulnerable root zone. The pattern always reveals the perpetrator.
Section 6. Solving the case, applying the models.
By combining our investigative steps with our conceptual models, we literally have everything we need to solve the case. We've categorized the suspects, we've gathered the evidence, and we've analyzed the patterns. Now we use all this knowledge not just to point fingers, but to actively intervene and protect the rest of the garden. The ultimate goal of this entire explainer is to show you how to break the disease triangle. Because remember, if one side falls, the disease fails. You can remove the susceptible host side of the triangle simply by choosing disease-resistant plant varieties for your garden. You can attack the pathogen side by practicing good sanitation, like, wiping down your pruning shears with rubbing alcohol, or just removing infected fallen leaves so those spores can't overwinter. And honestly, the most effective thing you can do is remove the favorable environment by just slightly adjusting how you garden. This is usually the cheapest and most organic intervention available to us. Simply spacing your plants a little further apart improves airflow, allowing the leaves to dry way faster, which instantly stops moisture-loving fungi right in their tracks. You have the power to break the triangle.
All of this leaves us with a pretty critical realization. Every single time you step into your yard with a hose, a pair of clippers, or a bag of fertilizer, you are shifting the balance. You are either making your plants stronger, or you might accidentally be setting the stage for an infection. So I really want to leave you with this thought. How are your everyday actions in the garden completing or breaking the disease triangle right now? Are you unknowingly creating the perfect botanical crime scene? Take these conceptual models, step outside, and start investigating your own backyard. Thank you so much for joining me in this explainer. Until next time, happy sleuthing.